that old world European version that distrusted the public. That's what's at stake, is our sovereignty itself. From the WHO to the UN, it is fundamentally skeptical of sovereignty, especially the sovereignty of a nation founded on rejecting that monarchical vision. And I think that the deeper question to ask is not what comes from the outside that causes us to cede our sovereignty, but what is it inside each of us that makes us want to bend the knee? That's the real question. When the Israelites escaped the Pharaoh, they're wandering the desert, lost in the wilderness, finding their way to the promised land, but they couldn't find it. What did they say? We want to go back and be ruled by the Pharaoh. So the real question for us to ask, as much as I have been a chief critic of the multinational, international institutions that are impeding on the sovereignty of the United States, from ESG to stakeholder capitalism to whatever new label they come up with. Yes, these are top-down forces, but their trick only works if we ourselves are willing to bend the knee. And I think that when it comes to the global climate religion in particular, that's the real question. What is it that makes us want to bend the knee? They can't take our sovereignty. It'll have to be up to us to give it to them. And my view is that we have to fill that vacuum of purpose with our own vision of what it actually means to still be a citizen of this nation, not some nebulous global citizen fighting climate change. No, a citizen of the United States of America. And to say that is true, that means something to me, and I will stand for my sovereignty and the sovereignty of my nation. Thank you for that question. I appreciate it. Couple more.
Mr. Ramaswamy, center all the way to the back. We are incredibly tight on time, so this will be our last question. Ma'am.
We'll take one more in response to the audience. I can't resist. Thank you. Having too much fun.
I lived in China for 1 year and also in Taiwan for 1 year. So my question is regarding that area of the world.
Good.
So my first question about China is, we know that China does not have an elected government. So we can see the Chinese government and Chinese people as being different. From my time living in China, I've seen there are many Chinese people who are curious about America and want to come visit here, come study here, come be immigrants here. And so my question in regard to China is, what are the creative or innovative ways that your administration would try to build a relationship and rapport with the new generation of Chinese people that's growing up, that's the future of China? And my second question regarding Taiwan is, if you were to make this policy very clear about after a certain time period, once we have semiconductors, that you would not defend Taiwan, what would stop China, if there truly are enemies, wouldn't they want to then attack us first before we get semiconductors?
Okay, great question. I'll take the second. Actually, I'll take them in order as you asked them. So the first question is a beautiful question. I actually didn't share some of my own background. I've spent a lot of time in China myself. I actually was an exchange student at Beida, which is, so Harvard has their exchange program. It's sort of the Harvard of China. I spent time at Hong Kong University. I've done business in China in my first business. And it's a lot of those experiences that opened my eyes to a CCP that has dramatically changed. This is not Hu Jintao's CCP anymore. And I think that this has changed dramatically, even under our own plain sight view, over even the last 10 years, as Xi Jinping brings his iron fist down now to take his unprecedented third term as the leader of the CCP, breaking that chain of succession and literally physically removing Hu Jintao to go along with it in the party meeting that did it last October. So I think it's a brilliant question for you to ask. Who are those kids holding up those white sheets in that white sheet revolution just, what it was, a year or so ago? It will be my job as the next US president to distinguish the Communist Party of China from the people of China, to whom I will do my best to speak to them directly as allies of free people. We are born, we as human beings are born to be free. We, all of us, not just Americans, are endowed by our Creator with the will to be free. But to earn our sovereignty, it must be, as we did in this country, it must be earned. We cannot earn it for them. In fact, we must continue to earn it for ourselves. But I think it will be up to them to earn it for themselves while knowing that when the United States is strong, we set an example of what is possible. And that's why I think our moral obligation to the world isn't to go intervene and fight somebody else's revolution for them. No. Our moral obligation is to set an example of what is possible for free people around the world. And so that's the distinction I will draw. We will talk to the Chinese people separately from the way that we deal with Xi Jinping and his autocratic boot on our necks through the legs of the CCP. To your second question about Taiwan. So, look, I think that there's a real opportunity for us to put China and Taiwan on notice of exactly what our intentions are. This is a radical break from the policy of strategic ambiguity, but I think this allows us to accomplish three goals in one. One is to put Taiwan on notice that it needs to spend on its own defense for the long run if it wishes to retain its sovereignty. There's an election in Taiwan in 2024. One of the two parties has a different view on this, and the KMT could very well win the election, for all we know. The second thing, though, that it does is it puts China on notice that we will not be okay with you holding an economic gun to our head, trying to get to that deal that we would otherwise never do, the deal that says, you know, they get to make our stuff if we give them our IP. No, that is not a good deal. We do not want parity for the next 200 years between the United States and China. That new bipolar order is not something that we should wish to voluntarily accept. So you will not hold that economic gun made of semiconductors to our head. But it also sends the signal that afterwards, we have now smoked out two different intentions that China may have for taking over Taiwan. Right now, the problem with strategic ambiguity is we don't know which one's really guiding Xi Jinping. I mean, the guy trots out in his Mao Zedong outfits, and there's some weird psychology going on there, right? I mean, Mao Zedong did some, really was unkind to his own father as part of the Cultural Revolution. As best we can tell, tortured, possibly abused, maybe even Xi himself was, and yet now he gets Mao Zedong-style tailor-made suits. I mean, there's something going on in that psychology, which is a headspace that, you know, I can only speculate to explore. But you have these deep nationalistic impulses to reunify, as he would call it, one China. Yet we also have this impulse to lord over the United States. And my answer is, for one of those, our answer is no. I will not see a country where my children and my grandchildren, our children and our grandchildren grow up to be a bunch of Chinese serfs because we're held hostage to the way we live our modern lives. No is the answer to that question. And we will get to independence by the end of my first term in 2028. But if the second motivation is really what remains and guides him, to close off the unfinished business of the Chinese Civil War dating back to 1949, well, look, I think that it is preferable that we still deter that from happening by way of alliances with India and preparing Taiwan to stand for its own security interests, and Japan, which will further be threatened in this scenario. But I will not send our sons and daughters. I'm certainly, in the current facts, not inclined to be in a position to say that we will send our sons and daughters and our troops to fight for that purpose if we've already achieved the more important purpose that advances American interests. I recognize that probably in the news cycle tomorrow, this discussion will be treated very unkindly, just because it is a shock to the system. You're not supposed to do it this way. But I believe we live in a moment where if we are clear about our actual interests, we will actually command a greater credibility in drawing red lines that other nations will dare not cross because they know they can actually trust us, rather than the smoke and mirrors of liberal hegemony, which has not worked in this country for the last 25 years. I promised I would take one more question. I will take one last question, and then we will.
Sir, off to your left right here.
Thank you.
Hi, sir. My name is Parker. I'm 21 years old. My question...
21?
21, yeah.
Good for you. Big
Thank you.
guy. I like that.
Appreciate
You
it.
football player? What do you do?
In high school, yeah.
High school football player? I like that. All right,
Yeah.
that's good.
My question is kind of related to the younger generation, which is one thing that my generation is really frustrated by is how unproductive our government is. And
Makes a couple of us, man.
right.
2 generations included.
And you have some very bold ideas, and I agree with a lot of what you say. My question to you would be, what would you do as president to ensure that you break down those partisan walls that are keeping our government from actually advancing our interest as a country?
Yes. So this is the choice we face in this election, actually. We're on a night where we're scaring a lot of people, so we might as well keep on going with this. So here's the truth. Here's the choice we face in this GOP primary. Right now, this is relevant. The answer to your question is at stake in 2024. Do you want incremental reform? Or do you want revolution? I stand on the side of revolution. And so I'm not going to go in and tinker around the edges. And yeah, I can say it in a tough guy voice. I'm going to get in there and fire Christopher Wray. Well, that sounds good. That's fine. But, you know, James Comey, Christopher Wray, potato, you know. We need to get in there and shut the darn thing down. The J. Edgar Hoover building of the FBI, auction it off. We don't need it anymore. We cannot reform these bureaucracies. They're unreformable. This is Thomas Hobbes stuff. This is the modern Leviathan, okay? And if you don't know what that word is, just watch the bureaucracy of the federal government, then you know what it is. We have to get in there and do what really no U.S. president has for a long time had the spine to do, channel Nixon's skepticism. Indeed, a skepticism that Donald Trump, to his credit, shared. But to say we can't just roll that log over and see what crawls out. Right? You strike the swamp strikes back. If you're going to roll that log over, you better be ready to bring the pesticide. And that is what I'm bringing to Washington, D.C. We have to shut it down. That is how we revive this nation. We stand not for victimhood, we stand for victory. Thank you. God bless you. God bless our United States of America. Thank you. Thank you.